Welcome to New Stripe City, a podcast for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie. I know it's been a while and it's been a long time coming, but I guarantee you guys this will be worth it. Today, I'm going to do a deep dive into all things Bengals draft, and I just completed Prime, and so we're also going to go through who will be on the Bengals draft board. So bear with me. So, first things first, I'm going to review some of the draft trends for the Bengals. A lot of people wonder if they're going to pick offense, defense. This will be not exactly the definitive answer, but this will give you some more insight instead of just it being my opinion. These are numbers. These are the analytics and stats and trends from what the Bengals have done ever since Marvin Lewis has taken over. I can slice by the entire period from 2003 to 2017. I can go back 5 years. I can go back 10 years. So the first thing we're going to do is everyone wants to know where the Bengals are going to go in round one. Historically, if you look at this right here, this represents offense and defense. So historically, it's been a pretty even split with 52%, almost 53% there of the draft picks being on offense and 45 being on defense, right? So let's look at round one. Let's look at round one throughout Marvin Lewis's entire tenure, right? Similar kind of dynamic there, right? So we have 56% on offense, 43% on defense. But then this is where we get into things that are interesting. We're looking at the first round. We're looking at his entire career and tenure here. The Bengals have only taken a quarterback 6% of the time as compared to 31% being cornerback. We all know that. There have been five first round cornerbacks taken more than any other position in the Marvin Lewis era here. Next, we have surprisingly linebacker, and you think of David Pollock. You also think of Keith Rivers. It depends on what you really consider David Pollock, but he was listed as a linebacker, so he counts as a linebacker. Then you have tackle, which shouldn't be of much surprise because we had Andre Smith and we had said Obwehi. Tight end is very interesting. A lot of people don't realize tight end was another position that was drafted multiple times, and it's the second highest. You talk about Tyler Eifert, you talk about Jermaine Gresham, that gets into that area. Wide receiver, this moved up from last year, obviously with the pick of John Ross. AJ Green and John Ross have been the only receivers taken. And then you get into the guard where you have the Kevin Zeitler pick, and then you also have what do we have here? Running back as well with Chris Perry, right? So you have a lot of things there. And then you look at this, like I said, 56 to 43. So let's do something interesting, right? Let's look at recent history, right? So let's look at the last 5 years here, right? So we'll go from 2017 all the way back to 2013, right? It seems that the Bengals have favored offense as of late, right? So they have 60% of their first round picks in the last 5 years have been on offense, 40% have been on defense. And you look at the positions that have been taken, right? Cornerback, no surprise that that's still high, right? Because I believe you had Darquez Dennard and William Jackson III. Then you have tackle here with Seta Boehi. Then you have tight end with Tyler Eifert. And you have wide receiver with John Ross. So the Bengals haven't taken a defensive tackle in the first round ever in their history. They haven't touched a safety here. There's a couple of positions that they just haven't touched. You look at it and you wonder, are these going to be signs of what the Bengals could do? I say they are. And another thing that's very interesting is when you look at the last couple of years, let's do this. So offense, you can see in 2017, and then 2016 defense, 2015 offense, 2014 defense, 2013 was offense again. So if we're aligning the trend with what the Bengals do, being that they just picked offense last year, technically this draft they could look to go defense. Now I'll get into some of those prospects later because I also have what's known as the Bengals draft board. So let's take a look at some other things. Let's do the same thing, but let's look at the second round, right? So when we look at the second round, this is where things kind of get interesting. The Bengals, over Marvin Lewis's entire tenure here, have decidedly gone with offense over defense in the second round. You look at that 58.82% there versus the 41%. And it should also come as no surprise that the majority of those picks have been running back. You look at last year, you look at Joe Mixon, you think about Jeremy Hill, you think about guys that we've taken like Kenny Irons in the past. Those were guys that were selected in the second round. But then you also had your defensive ends like a Carlos Dunlap that come into the next highest position. And you've also taken linebackers there. So it looks like they've taken two defensive ends in the second round, and they've also taken two linebackers as well as two offensive tackles and two wide receivers. You think about Tyler Boyd, you think about some of the guys that they've taken in the second round, and it kind of makes sense. Corner, they haven't really touched there. Defensive tackle, they've touched a little bit there, but not necessarily as much as you think. Outside of Devin Steele, they really haven't touched on defensive tackle that much. Then you talk about guard, you have quarterback here, and then you also have safety. The only safety that they took in the second round, if my memory serves me right, I believe it was, man, this was actually the same year that Jonathan Joseph came out. His name is escaping me. I want to say Mediu Williams, but I'm not exactly sure. So then let's take a look at the third round, right? Let's see what the third round has been over the Marvin Lewis tenure, and it has decisively been defense. So you can almost bet your hat that in the third round of this year's draft, Marvin Lewis more than likely is going to pick something on defense. And historically, it's been defensive end. Surprisingly, on offense, it's almost all been wide receiver. There's been one or maybe a couple tight ends taken here. Let's see, two tight ends taken here, five receivers in the second round. That's impressive. Four defensive ends, but then you also have four linebackers. You've had defensive tackles taken. Corner starts to slip a little bit more. You've got the LB/DE kind of edge rusher that takes up that spot, and then you have your safety there as well. But decisively, wide receiver and defensive end have been the favorites. But when you look at it overall, it's been multiple years of taking a defensive player in the third round, right? So let's look at the fourth round. In the fourth round, it's been somewhat some of the same things. We've got 59%, basically 60% here on defense throughout Marvin Lewis's tenure. Uh, 40% of that being on the offensive side, with defensive tackle, no surprise, this is where Geno Atkins was taken, with five defensive tackles being taken in the fourth round, and the highest average that you have out there. Also, a lot of people have been wondering when the Bengals could take a center. The numbers seem to indicate that it could be around the fourth round. They've taken, it looks like, three centers in the fourth round. So that could align with what the Bengals are looking at. Then you have corner and so on and so forth. We'll get to the fifth round. On the fifth round, it seems like this is a little bit split, and you'll start to see this S here, and that stands for special teams. So those are your kickers or your punters or things of that nature. So this is probably a little bit of Kevin Huber in here, but you also have a lot of guys on the offensive side. It kind of flips. Seems like the fifth round is where they tend to like offensive guys. And then you look at the defensive side of things, and then you have 33% of the defensive side is there. And when you look at it, it seems like that's where they look for their quarterbacks at. This is obviously where they picked AJ McCarron. I think they also took like a Jeff Rowe back in the day. They also look for linebackers there. They've taken two linebackers there. A surprising thing is they've taken three tackles, which is actually, excuse me, I misspoke earlier, but this is the highest position that's taken there. So it could be another tackle that the Bengals do take there, and also wide receiver. This is where they found that Marvin Jones kind of sweet spot. So that will be interesting to see where they go from there. Excuse me. So then we'll look at the sixth round, and this is where they tend to look at the offense again, and they tend to go with wide receivers and those late round running backs, which they've taken four running backs in the sixth round. They've taken five receivers there, so not a surprise. I believe this is also around the area where they found Husmanzada, even though I think he's in the seventh round, but they found some guys there in the sixth round. And then the seventh round, the last one that no one cares about, it's just almost guaranteed that they're going to pick a receiver. You talk about 26% here, 65% of the time of it being an offensive position. That's more than likely what they're going to do. So instead of going through this thing this way, let's look at the top three rounds, right? And let's look at the past 5 years on what they've done, right? So, matter of fact, actually, let me take this out. This was something that I found earlier. Look at this. The past 5 years, they have picked an offensive position nearly every time, 83% of the time. Mostly it's been a running back, but they've also had tackles and wide receivers. So keep your eyes open there, right? So yeah, let's go back and we'll look at, let's just look at the past 5 years and let's look at on offense, or in the first round, they've gone 60% offense, 40% defense. Let's look in the second round. It's been offense, like I just showed you guys. And in the third round, it's been defense 83% of the time in the last 5 years. So this kind of gives you a sense of where the Bengals could go. You look at number four for the fourth round, the last, I mean, it's almost pretty decisive on what they're going to do here. So with that being said, let's stop looking at this and let's pull up Prime. Now, for you guys that don't know, Prime is actually, give me 1 second to pull it up here. Prime is actually what we like to call our draft board, right? So our draft board kind of talks to us here. It tells us what the Bengals are looking at, tells us who they could be looking to acquire in the draft. And so now I'm going to bring up Prime, right? So Prime we have here as the ideal player for the Cincinnati Bengals, right? This is what they look for in terms of their draft trends, some of that stuff that you guys saw. What kind of size they like, guys, just your prototypical Bengals player. I don't want to give too much of it away because it has been pretty accurate. The first year I started it, it was 80% accurate. It called guys like William Jackson III, Andrew Billings, Tyler Boyd. I mean, that entire draft, it was like nearly knocking everything out of the park. So when you look at this, the first thing that you have to do is you look at the size metric. And this is what position this aligns with on the Cincinnati Bengals. The second column is obviously the player's name. The third is the grade, and this grade is indicative on how good of a match this guy aligns with the ideal Bengals player. And then on the next column, you have the projected round. So the way that this is actually organized and set is you sort by the highest grade, and then you also sort by the highest round. That way you kind of get an idea of what guys the Bengals are looking at in the first round, the second round, and so forth. Now, on draft day, I would do a live stream showing you guys how this thing works. But usually during the draft, if someone is taken, then that player is immediately filtered out and removed from the board, just like a regular draft board. And then the next highest guy is who would be likely for the Bengals to pick. So when you look at this, I know the first thing you're thinking of is, why is Saquon Barkley that high? Saquon Barkley is on here because he's a running back, right? The Bengals probably will not address running back anytime soon, not in the first couple of rounds, but we had to include the entire running back class on here because we do know that at one point they will actually take a running back, right? So that's why Saquon Barkley is there. But the thing is, when you think about how I just explained the list, it actually doesn't matter that he's there because, as you can see, he's projected to go in the top five. Clearly, we pick at 21, so more than likely he will not be there. The same with Quentin Nelson. I can definitely see Quentin Nelson being the number one player on their board. They asked this guy, could he play all of the positions. And it's not a surprise to me being that I did this research, because you can see that he's a fit for a lot of the positions that the Bengals actually have. He can play at tackle, he can play at guard, he can play a multitude of positions. So it's not a surprise that they have him there. But when we start getting into the realistic territory, we look at Roquan Smith, right? And it's kind of, I mean, you can't really say that it's too realistic because he's more than likely going in the top 10, but he should be one of the top rated players on their board, followed by Minka Fitzpatrick, another guy who fits the mode of what the Bengals like in their secondary guys and what they like in terms of production and size and things of that nature lately is Minka Fitzpatrick. So I'm kind of upset because, I'm a Derwin guy, so I kind of wanted them to go with Derwin over him. But Minka's there, and more than likely, Minka probably isn't going to be there, right? And so number five is where things get really interesting, and that's Rashaan Evans, who comes in with a higher grade than Vita Vey or Mike Hughes. And that's interesting because the Bengals definitely need a linebacker, and Rashaan Evans has just recently visited with them. He meets a lot of the metrics that they like, and I could definitely see him being one of the picks. I mean, we talked about the trends earlier, and we talked about how the Bengals have flip-flopped each year. So this year could be a defensive pick. And it's funny because a lot of these guys, Roquan Smith, Amika Fitzpatrick, Rashaan Evans, they're pretty high on their actual board. So next, we bring in Vita Vey, which is very interesting. It's very interesting because defensive coordinator Terrell Austin has made it a staple this year that he wants to stop the run. Vita Vey is there. Andrew Billings hasn't worked out so far. Ryan Glasgow hasn't done enough to separate himself. They've signed Chris Baker, but Vita Vey is a guy that aligns with what they look for in a Bengals player. After him, it gets very interesting with Mike Hughes, the cornerback out of UCF. And the reason that this is interesting to me is you saw them take a small school guy like William Jackson III a few years ago. He was a guy that was projected first to second round. He was number one on the board at prime when the Bengals picked, and that's who they took. And Mike Hughes is very interesting for a number of reasons. Number one, you lost Pac-Man Jones. You need to replace not only his ability to play on defense, but his niche as a returner. As of now, they really don't have a returner on the roster outside of Brandon Wilson. They also have Tyler Boyd, but Mike Hughes is a guy that brings that electricity from the corner position like Pac-Man did, and he's also a very good corner. And you have to look at the fact that Darqueze Dennard is going into a contract year. This is his last year. More than likely, he possibly walks next year. You need to have another third corner in there to pair with William Jackson III and with Drake Kirkpatrick. So Mike Hughes definitely makes sense. Like at first when I saw this, I was like, what? But the numbers don't lie. These follow the trends that the Bengals like. If you look at the guy, he's a ball hawking guy that they tend to be looking for right now that can give them that balance on special teams and on defense. He's not a guy you have to rush in there. He gets that year to develop. Mike Hughes could be a guy that you could hear on draft day. Next, we have Calvin Ridley, who more than likely isn't going to be who the Bengals take. I mean, let's just be real. They took John Ross last year. I doubt that Ridley makes it all the way to them at 21. Not because I think he'll go in the top 10, but I think he'll go between that 10 to 18 to 19 area, well out of the Bengals radar. I don't think that they're looking at him. But next, you move on to Taven Bryan, a defensive tackle out of Florida. This pick would make sense. The Bengals do like their SEC defensive linemen. They like these guys to be a certain size. He more so fits kind of the Geno Atkins mold. So it will be interesting to see if he's still there. He's a guy that could go within that range as well. And then we have the favorite offensive lineman, the guy that they've shown so much interest in Mike McGlinchey. He comes in with a prime grade of 4.71. I think McGlinchey is the guy that they want. I'm not sure if he's still there though, because like this offensive tackle class, he's kind of been pinned as the top guy there. It's either him or Colton Miller, and if it's on the Bengals, they're definitely going with Mike McGlinchey over him. So Mike McGlinchey is a guy who could be there. Remember, this goes by the way that these guys get eliminated. So it could either be Mike McGlinchey here at 11. It could end up being Tremaine Edwards down here at 19, right? So you never know. Next, Bradley Chubb. Really, no reason to discuss him. More than likely, he's gone. Then you have Deron Payne, who the Bengals have also shown a lot of interest in. And then you have Derwin James, my guy, who's one of my favorites. You have Vander Esch, Josh Allen, and Josh Rosen. I doubt that these guys are taken, but you can kind of see what their grades are. Sam Darnold, Marcus Davenport. So with them being in the threes, more than likely, I'm thinking that if there's one of these fringe first round guys with a higher grade, I think they kind of go with that higher grade guy. They did that with William Jackson III. So I definitely could see them placing some of these guys over them. These projections are just from NFL.com. We never know really what the draft grade or the projected round is going to be, but this kind of worked for me last time, so I kept going with it. Usually I kind of go with CBS, but I decided to go with NFL.com this year. So let's get into some of these other picks that are in the first to the second range, right? And one that sticks out to me is Josh Jackson, who's a cornerback out of Iowa. But you also have Isaiah Wynn, who's high on a lot of people's radars. He's out of Georgia. He can play offensive tackle for this team, guard. He can move around. You have him and Colton Miller tied for the same kind of interest. So we'll see what they do there. You have Jare Alexander. So there's all of these guys, James Daniels, Maurice Hurst. There's all of these guys that the Bengals could go with. So like I said, I'm gonna go through these things. I'm going to live do prime with you guys. So I'll be on here with that going through prime. So if you want to check it out, see if um this aligns with what the Bengals are doing, it'll be a good time. Lamar Jackson, another name that's pretty hot right now in Bengals circles, being that he just visited, came on a pretty interesting. He came at a pretty interesting time, right? Because right now there can't be the possibility that this guy is, possibly being considered as a quarterback. But I mean, why would he waste his time coming to see the Bengals this late in the process if that wasn't the case? Another thing I want to show you guys is just the guy with the highest prime grade, right? Regardless of round, it looks like this guy, Scott Quessenberry, it looks like he can play a lot of different positions for the Bengals. If you were following my Twitter, you probably saw me add some highlight tapes of these guys earlier today. Anthony Everett, that's a guy that could possibly be in that cornerback to center talk in the second round. Troy Fumagalli, that was a guy that stuck out to me. A lot of you guys love Billy Price. He's pretty high on the prime board. I think if he's there in the second round, it would not shock me if they do go after him. Some other guys that stood out to me is Martinez Rankin. He's another utility offensive lineman. Marcus Allen. This guy is more of a box safety, not exactly what they're kind of looking for. So yeah, I mean, the Bengals could go in a number of ways. I'm going to go based off of some of those trends that we looked at and do a quick mock draft here just to take a little bit more of your time. I know I haven't been around in a while, so we'll do a live mock draft, right? And we'll just say, just playing devil's advocate here, these guys are definitely gone, right? Quentin Nelson, and all of these guys. I don't see them being there. So yeah, they're gonna be gone. So those guys are gone. Let's say Warcon Smith is gone. Let's say let's say those guys are gone. Let's say Calvin Ridley is gone. And I don't want to be cliche, so let's just say Mike McGlinchey is gone. I think he's actually gone. And that's just my opinion. I think he's gone. I think he's gone. I think Derwin James is gone. I think these guys are definitely gone. Sam Darnold's definitely gone. Let's see. Okay. So let's say this is what we're looking at, right? Let's say we're looking at Vita Vey, Mike Hughes, and Tevin Bryan. What does the numbers tell us? Well, the trends would tell us that linebacker is in play, cornerback definitely is in play, And defensive tackle is kind of a toss up. They've never taken a defensive tackle in the first year of the draft. But looking at the prime grades right now, I'm going to go and take Rashawn Evans out of Alabama with the first pick in the draft. I think he goes, I think he's first there for us. So we're going to have our first pick. One, we're going with Rashawn Evans, right? Now, the interesting thing is they said that majority of our second round picks lately have been uh, on the offensive side of the ball, right? So this will align with what we're doing. So let's go now and let's get to the guys that are in the second round. And sometimes the Bengals do come up on like little steals here and there, but let's just go down here. Let's see. Let's say, for instance, let's just say Billy Price is still there. I want to say James Daniels, but let's just say Billy Price is there in the second round. He's staring at you in the face with this grade of this 5.38. I think that the Bengals take him. So let's go ahead and make our second round pick, which is great value for him. Now it sucks because he's gonna be hurt, but we're gonna go ahead and take Billy Price. And I'm not just taking this guy because he's an Ohio State alum or anything like that. This is a guy that the Bengals have shown interest in. So we're gonna go with Billy Price in the second round, and that's what we're gonna do there. So this just means, yeah, hold on. Let's get here. Let's clean this up a little bit. We're gonna do 4 picks here, so let's do that. Okay, so we're going with Billy Price there, right? So then let's move into the third round, and I believe it said in the third round that the Bengals tend to go mostly with defense there, right? So let's see what we have here. Second to third, second to third. Let's go all the way down to the third. So then we get to our third round, and what do the Bengals look at, right? We've already got our linebacker. We've already got um, mostly what we need, but we need a safety, right? We need a safety. Safety could be, let me take 1 second to look at prime real quick. Let's look at the third round. Last 5 years, they're going defense. They usually look at, it looks like they usually look at defensive ends to linebackers. We already have our linebacker. Let's see what we have here that aligns with defensive end and linebacker. Why not take Arden Key? So we're gonna take Arden Key here. Um, Arden Key is a guy that they've shown some interest in. So why not pick him there? And I think we also have a second, third round pick. So we're gonna go with Edge Arden Key there. Let's undo that. Let's do that here. We're gonna take that edge pick. So we'll take Arden Key there, and then we have a second, third round pick, and we're gonna come back around to that. And I think that they go back to offense here, right? Is it offense or is it defense? It's been mostly defense. 83% of the time has been defense, right? So let's go back down here. Let's see that we've got. Let's see what we've got. Hmm. Now this is where it kind of gets interesting because you do have Antonio Callaway sitting there. You do have him. Hmm. Got another corner. We got corner with J.C. Jackson. They haven't done that much. Let's see. Defensive end, we've already addressed. I think this could be the realm where they look at safety. Let's look at safety. What do we have here at the safety position right now? So we're looking at third. Some of these guys could fall. Jerome Baker. Jerome Baker is an interesting prospect for them because he kind of aligns with what they want or what they say they want out of that safety position that they're looking at. That we're looking at Eric Reed for, right? This is a tough one. I'm actually gonna throw a wild card in here, and I'm gonna go with and it's gonna seem like oh, you know what? We're gonna go with Jesse Bates. That's exactly who we're going with. Jesse Bates is higher. He's a second to third round guy. He could still be there. So we're gonna go with Jesse Bates. I was thinking about making the hybrid linebacker pick, but it's just too many linebackers. That's like five linebackers, dog. So we're gonna go with Jesse Bates there. And this looks very interesting because we have a draft that's filled with a lot of defense, right? We've got the linebacker, we've got the edge guy slash linebacker Aaron Arden Key to kind of step up for the absence of Chris Smith this year. We've got the safety here and Jesse Bates. That's a guy that's going to be able to attack the ball and get us interceptions. And I feel like you guys want me to do one more? Want me to do one more? So in the fourth round, it looks like they've kind of gone corner here. They've gone some defensive tackle. Man, could this end up being a defensive draft for the Bengals? I don't know. I don't know, but it's looking like it might have to go there. I know you guys are probably like, is this dude gonna take another defender? I might have to, bro. This is actually their round where they always take defensive tackles, right? So let's see. You got Derek Nandi from Florida State with a 4.13. You got Foley. It doesn't look like they're much interested in him. I'm gonna go with they've got Andrew Brown. This was where they picked. This is where Prime picked Andrew Billings. Let's see. I'm just looking through here. Just looking through. I'm gonna go with Derek Nandi from Florida State. I think that, and like I said, this is all subjective to how the draft actually falls. Like me just picking a guy out of this list isn't going to particularly be that guy. I mean, he could get drafted in the third round and I'd be just sitting here like holding everything, but they typically like values. So I'm going to do one little bonus pick and it's going to be Derek Nandi from Florida State. So not exactly how I thought this would really play out, but still a very solid draft. Like I'd be very happy with this if they had that. If you had a guy like Rashaan Evans, you touch the center position with Billy Price, you take Arden Key, you take Jesse Bates, you take Derek Nandi. I mean, this is a draft that's deep. I mean, typically you probably want to go offensive tackle or offensive line there, but this is just solely based off the trends in the last 5 years. That's the direction that they've kind of gone. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think. Like I said, I will be live streaming Prime when it comes through. But yeah, this is very interesting. I mean, to see this being a possibility there, Rashaan Evans, I think, would be a great pick. Mike Hughes would be a great pick. Mike McGlinchey would be a great pick, but it all comes down to how these guys fall, right? And I chose to pick guys with high prime grades 5.55, 4.4, and 4. So leave me some comments. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys want me to touch on, go into, explain. But I like to talk about numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I like to throw the actual stuff out there outside of just giving my opinion. But with that being said, if you guys have any questions, any things you want me to touch on, let me know. And as usual, I'll leave you guys with a who day all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.